The tomb was not supposed to be open. At least, that was what every alien in the chamber believed. For thousands of years, the ancient stone vault had remained sealed beneath the surface of the dead world Kareth 9. No explorer, no scientist, and no historian had ever dared to break the locks placed on it by the First Galactic Empire. The warnings carved around the tomb were clear, written in a language so old that even alien scholars struggled to translate it. Do not wake what once ruled the stars. But today, that warning was being ignored. Bright white lights filled the underground chamber as a group of alien archaeologists prepared the final unlock sequence. Their long, silver bodies moved nervously around the massive black sarcophagus that stood in the center of the room. And standing among them was a human. His name was Daniel Reyes. Daniel was not supposed to be here either. Humans had joined the galactic community only 12 years ago. Compared to the ancient alien civilizations, humanity was still considered young, curious, and sometimes unpredictable. But Daniel was one of the best Xena historians Earth had. He specialized in studying lost empires and forgotten civilizations. That was exactly why the Galactic Council had invited him, because the tomb they were about to open belonged to someone legendary. The first emperor. According to alien history, this mysterious ruler had once controlled half the galaxy nearly 40,000 years ago. Entire star systems had obeyed his commands. His armies had conquered planets that modern civilizations still struggled to reach. And then, suddenly, the empire vanished. No wars, no rebellions, no disasters recorded. Just silence. The emperor died, his empire collapsed, and the galaxy moved on. For centuries, historians believed the emperor himself had been an alien species long extinct. Some believed he was a myth created to unite early civilizations. Others believed the tomb was empty, nothing more than an ancient political symbol. But today, they were about to find out the truth. A tall alien researcher named Valkyrie stepped forward and activated the final scanner. The seal is weakening, Valkyrie said, her voice echoing through the chamber. In a few moments, the sarcophagus will open. Daniel crossed his arms, watching carefully. Strange, he said quietly. Valkyrie turned toward him. What is strange, human? Daniel looked at the massive stone coffin. It was carved with symbols of stars, battles, and strange creatures. Kneeling before a tall armored figure, the armor in the carvings, Daniel said slowly. It doesn't look alien. A few scientists nearby paused. Valkyrie tilted her head. Explain. Daniel stepped closer to the carvings and traced one of the ancient figures with his finger. The shape of the helmet, the shoulders, the stance. It looks human. Several aliens exchanged uneasy glances. That is impossible, one of them said quickly. Humans were not even spacefaring 40,000 years ago. Daniel nodded slowly. I know. The room fell quiet. Then the sarcophagus moved. A deep grinding sound echoed through the chamber as ancient locks, untouched for millennia, finally released. Dust filled the air as the massive stone lid slowly began sliding open. Every scientist leaned forward. Cameras activated. Scanners HUMED. This was the moment historians had waited for across the galaxy. The lid moved another inch, then another. Finally, with a heavy thud, the ancient coffin opened. For a moment, no one spoke. Inside the tomb lay a skeleton. The bones were old, darkened by time, but surprisingly well preserved. The skeleton was wearing pieces of ancient armor, cracked and faded. After thousands of years, Valkyrie slowly stepped closer. The first emperor, she whispered. Several scientists immediately began scanning the remains. The skeletal structure matches the ancient descriptions, one of them said. Tall, powerful frame. This must be him. Daniel said nothing. He was staring at the skull. Something about it felt wrong, very wrong. He moved closer to the sarcophagus. Human Daniel, Valkyrie said. Do you recognize something? Daniel didn't answer right away. He leaned over the tomb, studying the skull carefully. The shape of the jaw, the eye sockets, the cheekbones. His heart began beating faster. No, He whispered. One of the alien scientists noticed his reaction. What is wrong, human? Daniel slowly pointed toward the skull. At first, the aliens didn't understand, and they looked closer, and the entire room went silent, because the teeth inside the Emperor's skull were not alien. They were human. Perfectly human. Flat incisors. Rounded molars. The exact dental structure found only on Earth. Valkyrie's voice trembled. That cannot be correct. Another scientist quickly ran a scan. The machine beeped. Then it displayed the result. Dental structure confirmed. The computer announced. Human-type teeth detected. The chamber erupted in confused voices. How is that possible? This emperor ruled 40,000 years ago. Humans were not even part of the galactic community. But Daniel still hadn't moved. He kept staring at the skull. And then he said something that made the entire room freeze. You're all asking the wrong question. Valkyrie slowly turned toward him. What do you mean? Daniel looked back at the skeleton in the tomb. His voice was quiet, but filled with unease. The real question isn't why the Emperor had human teeth. He paused, his eyes darkened. The real question is, why does this skeleton look exactly like a human? For a long moment, no one in the chamber spoke. The alien scientists stared at the skeleton, then at Daniel, then back at the skeleton again, as if their eyes were refusing to accept what they were seeing. The air inside the tomb chamber suddenly felt heavier, thicker, as though the dead emperor himself was listening. Valkyrie slowly stepped closer to the sarcophagus. Her long fingers trembled slightly as she activated a deeper scan of the remains. That cannot be correct, she whispered. Again, more to herself than to anyone else. Daniel didn't answer. His eyes were still locked on the skull. The shape was unmistakable. A human skull. Not similar. Not close. Exactly human. One of the younger alien researchers spoke nervously. Perhaps it is coincidence. Some species share similar bone structures. Another scientist shook his head immediately. No, the dental pattern alone is impossible. The molars, the canines, the alignment. This matches human biology perfectly. The scanning device beeped again. Valkyrie looked at the floating holographic data appearing above the skeleton. Numbers and anatomical diagrams rotated slowly in the air. Her voice grew quieter. The skeletal proportions. They also match human measurements. A murmur spread through the chamber. Daniel finally straightened and looked around the room. Can I ask something? He said calmly. Valkyrie nodded slowly. Yes, human Daniel. Daniel gestured toward the skeleton. You said this emperor ruled 40,000 years ago. That is correct, Valkyrie replied. And you're certain about the dating? One of the archaeologists answered quickly. The tomb's structure, the star charts on the walls, the materials used, all of it confirms the same time period. Daniel exhaled slowly. That means something is very wrong with your history. Several aliens immediately reacted. Our historical records are extremely accurate. One of them said sharply. Daniel raised a hand. I'm not saying your records are wrong, he replied calmly. I'm saying they might be incomplete. Valkyrie studied him carefully. Explain. Daniel pointed again to the skull. Because that skeleton is human. I'm completely sure of it. Another wave of uneasy whispers moved through the room. Valkyrie turned back toward the tomb. If what you say is true, then it would mean humans existed in space 40,000 years ago. Daniel nodded slightly. Exactly. Silence filled the chamber again. One of the scientists laughed nervously. That is impossible. Human civilization only developed space travel a few decades ago. Daniel shrugged. That's what we believe. Valkyrie looked at him sharply. What do you mean, believe? Daniel hesitated. Then he said quietly. Human history before 10,000 years ago is complicated. A few aliens exchanged confused looks. Our records from that time are incomplete, Daniel continued. We have myths, fragments, lost civilizations, but nothing clear. Valkyrie's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting that your species once had an advanced civilization that disappeared? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the tomb chamber. The walls were covered with ancient carvings, massive battles, strange ships flying between stars, entire alien armies kneeling before a tall armored ruler, the Emperor. Daniel slowly pointed toward one of the carvings. Can someone zoom in on that? A scientist activated a scanner, projecting the image into the air. The hologram expanded. Emperor stood in the center of the scene, towering above alien soldiers. His armor was massive and detailed, decorated with symbols of stars and flames. Valkyrie leaned closer. I have studied these carvings many times, she said. They represent the Emperor's victory over the first coalition of worlds. Daniel nodded. Look at the hands. Valkyrie frowned. The hands? Yes. The image zoomed further. 5 fingers. 5. The chamber went quiet. Again. Most alien species in the galaxy had 3 or 4 digits. Very few had 5, but humans did. Valkyrie's voice lowered. That is concerning. Daniel crossed his arms. And look at the height difference. The Emperor is taller than every alien around him. Another scientist checked the measurements. The figure is approximately 2 meters tall. Daniel gave a small, humorless smile. That's average human height with armor. Valkyrie slowly turned back toward the skeleton. Her mind was clearly racing. If this Emperor truly was human, she said carefully, then your species ruled half the galaxy 40,000 years ago. Daniel shook his head slightly. No. Valkyrie blinked. No? Daniel looked down at the skull again. His voice dropped. If humans ruled the galaxy back then, there would be records of us everywhere. He pointed around the chamber. But there aren't. Valkyrie frowned. Then how? Do you explain this? Daniel didn't respond right away. He was looking at something inside the tomb. Something small. Half buried under the Emperor's ribs. He leaned forward slowly and brushed away a thin layer of ancient dust. A metallic object appeared. Valkyrie noticed immediately. What did you find? Daniel carefully lifted the object from the skeleton's chest. It was a small, circular device. Ancient. Scratch. But still intact. One of the scientists activated a scan. The machine beeped once. Then the result appeared. The alien. Researchers stared at the display. None of them understood it. But Daniel did. His face suddenly went pale. Valkyrie noticed instantly. Human Daniel. What is it? Daniel swallowed. His hand tightened around the object. It's a tag? A tag? Valkyrie repeated. Daniel nodded slowly. The room grew silent as he turned the object over. On the surface of the metal disc were faded, engraved letters. Old. Very old. But still readable. Daniel whispered the words out loud. United Earth Expeditionary Fleet. The chamber froze. One of the aliens spoke in disbelief. Earth, as in your home planet? Daniel nodded slowly. Yes. Valkyrie stared at the ancient tag. But this tomb is 40,000 years old. Daniel looked back at the skeleton. And his voice dropped to a whisper. Yeah. That's exactly the problem. For several seconds, no one moved. The ancient metal tag rested in Daniel's hand, catching the cold white light of the scanners. 40,000 years of dust had covered it. Yet the letters were still visible. United Earth Expeditionary Fleet. Aliens around him stared in complete disbelief. One of the scientists finally spoke, his voice shaking. Human Daniel. That language, is it truly from your planet? Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, it's English. Valkyrie stepped closer, studying the tag carefully. But this is impossible, she said quietly. Your species only joined the galactic community recently. Your technology is young compared to most civilizations. Daniel gave a small, uneasy laugh. That's what we thought too. Another alien activated a deeper scan of the object. Energy readings appeared in the air as a hologram expanded above the tomb. Strange patterns of ancient circuitry appeared inside the metal disc. It contains technology far older than anything your species currently uses. The scientist said. Daniel frowned. What kind of technology? The alien looked confused. We are still analyzing it, but it appears to be some kind of identification device. Daniel nodded slowly. That's exactly what it is. Valkyrie tilted her head. You recognize it? Daniel turned the tag in his fingers. In modern terms, we'd call it a military ID badge. Something soldiers carry to identify themselves. The chamber fell silent again. Valkyrie slowly looked at the skeleton inside the tomb. You are suggesting the first emperor was a human soldier? Daniel hesitated. That's one possibility. Another alien researcher shook his head. No, that does not make sense. This emperor commanded entire alien armies. Billions of soldiers served under him. Daniel looked back at the carvings on the wall. That's what your history says. Valkyrie studied his face. You doubt it. Daniel sighed. I don't doubt your records. But I think you're missing part of the story. He pointed to the skeleton again. Look at the armor. The scientists activated another scan. The cracked pieces of ancient armor were lifted carefully by small hovering drones. The machines examined the material closely. After a moment, one of the scanners beeped. The alien operating it froze. What is it? Valkyrie asked. The scientist swallowed. The metal composition. It doesn't match any known alien alloys. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. The alien slowly turned the holographic display toward him. This material matches early human titanium composites. Daniel exhaled slowly. Thought so. The room filled with uneasy whispers again. Valkyrie crossed her arms. So now we have a human skeleton, human armor, and a human military identification tag. She looked directly at Daniel. Explain how that is possible. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. I wish I could. Valkyrie's eyes narrowed. You are hiding something. Daniel shook his head quickly. No, I'm thinking. He walked slowly around the tomb, studying the carvings again. Every wall told the same story. The emperor conquering planets, alien leaders kneeling before him, armies marching under his banners. Daniel stopped in front of one carving that showed the emperor standing above dozens of alien rulers. Something about the image bothered him. Zoom in on this one, he said. The hologram expanded again. Valkyrie studied it carefully. What do you see? Daniel pointed toward the emperor's helmet. There. At first, the aliens didn't understand. Then the scanner enhanced the image. A small symbol appeared on the side of the helmet. Valkyrie leaned closer. That symbol. I have seen it before. Daniel's stomach tightened. He already knew what it was, but he waited. Valkyrie looked at Daniel slowly. That symbol appears in your human databases. Daniel nodded quietly. Yes. What does it mean? Daniel hesitated for a moment. Then he said the words. It's the emblem of Earth. The room fell completely silent. One of the alien scientists whispered, That cannot be real. Valkyrie looked from the carving to the skeleton, to the ancient tag in Daniel's hand. Her voice lowered. If this emperor was truly human, then your species once ruled the galaxy. Daniel shook his head again. You're still assuming he was the emperor. Valkyrie frowned. He is buried in the emperor's tomb. Daniel looked down at the skeleton. Something still didn't feel right. Very wrong. He pointed at the bones again. Look at the skeleton carefully. The scientists activated another scan. Numbers appeared beside the bones. Height, weight, bone density. Valkyrie studied the results. What about it? Daniel spoke slowly. The skeleton has multiple healed fractures. Another scientist confirmed it. Yes. There are signs of old combat injuries. Daniel nodded. Exactly. Valkyrie looked confused. That would make sense for a warrior emperor. Daniel shook his head. No. He leaned closer to the tomb. Not for someone who ruled half the galaxy. Valkyrie's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? Daniel pointed at the rib cage. These injuries, broken ribs, shoulder fractures, spinal damage. He looked up. This guy wasn't sitting on a throne. The alien stared at him. Daniel's voice grew quieter. He was fighting. Valkyrie folded her arms. That still does not explain why he is in the Emperor's tomb. Daniel didn't answer right away. He slowly looked back at the skull. The empty eye sockets stared up at him. from inside the sarcophagus. Then he noticed something else. A thin line across the skull. A deep crack. Not damage from time. Something else. Daniel leaned closer. His eyes widened. Oh no. Valkyrie stepped forward immediately. What did you find? Daniel pointed at the skull carefully. That crack. The scanner zoomed in. The chamber went silent again, because the fracture wasn't natural. It was perfectly circular, like something had pierced straight through the skull. Valkyrie's voice dropped. That looks like... Daniel finished the sentence. A bullet hole. The aliens looked at him in confusion. A bullet? One asked. Daniel swallowed slowly. Yes. He looked down at the skeleton again. Then he whispered something that made the entire room uneasy. If this man was the Emperor, then who shot him? The question hung in the air like a shadow. If this man was the Emperor, then who shot him? No one answered. The alien scientists stared at the skull, at the perfectly round hole in the bone. Their scanners confirmed what Daniel had already guessed. The damage was not caused by time, or pressure, or decay. It was a weapon impact. Valkyrie spoke first, her voice low and tense. You said the word. What does that mean? Daniel took a slow breath. It's a human projectile. Weapon, he explained. Old technology, but extremely effective. A small metal round fired at very high speed. Valkyrie looked back at the skull. You are saying another human killed him? Daniel didn't answer immediately, because something about the hole didn't make sense. He leaned closer again, studying the skull carefully. The scanners projected a three-dimensional model of the damage. Then Daniel's expression changed. Wait. Valkyrie noticed instantly. What is it? Daniel pointed at the hologram. Rotate the skull. The scanner obeyed. The image slowly turned. The entry wound was visible in the forehead, but something else appeared on the back of the skull. Another hole. Bigger. Jagged. The chamber fell silent again. Valkyrie whispered. That means the projectile entered from the front and exited the back. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah. One of the alien researchers spoke nervously. That still means someone shot him. Daniel shook his head. No. Look closer. The hologram zoomed in. The angle of the wound appeared as a red line passing through the skull. Valkyrie studied the trajectory carefully. Then her eyes widened. That angle. Daniel finished the thought quietly. It's downward. The aliens looked confused. Valkyrie looked back at Daniel. What does that mean? Daniel pointed to the trajectory line. If someone else shot him, the weapon would have been level with his head. But this shot came from above, at a steep angle. The alien scientists stared at the projection. Slowly, realization began to spread through the room. Valkyrie spoke carefully. You are suggesting the Emperor was kneeling? Daniel shook his head. No. He pointed to the skull again. The weapon wasn't above him. He paused. He was holding it. The words hit the room like a shockwave. One of the aliens whispered, You mean... Daniel nodded. This wasn't murder. Valkyrie's voice dropped. It was suicide. The chamber went completely silent. 40,000 years of history, suddenly, felt fragile. Valkyrie stepped back from the tomb. That cannot be correct, she said slowly. The first emperor ruled half the galaxy. Entire civilizations followed him. Daniel looked at the carvings on the walls again. The emperor standing, victorious. The emperor leading armies. The emperor conquering worlds. Then he looked back at the skeleton. And something finally clicked in his mind. We've been looking at this wrong, he said quietly. Valkyrie frowned. What do you mean? Daniel walked toward the wall carvings again. Your historians assumed this tomb belonged to the emperor. Yes, Valkyrie said. Daniel pointed at the skeleton. But what if it doesn't? The aliens looked confused. It was found in the emperor's tomb. One scientist argued. Daniel nodded. Exactly. He pointed to another carving. This one showed the emperor standing on a massive balcony, while alien crowds cheered below. But the figure's face was hidden behind armor. You've never actually seen the emperor's face in any of these carvings, have you? Valkyrie studied the wall. Slowly, she realized he was right. Every image showed armor, helmets, shadows, cover. A face. Daniel looked back at the skeleton again. What if the man in this tomb wasn't the Emperor? The room grew tense. But the last human who tried to stop him. The alien stared at him. Valkyrie's voice lowered. You believe the Emperor was human? Daniel shook his head slowly. No. His eyes moved across the ancient carvings. Again, across the alien armies, across the kneeling civilizations, then back to the skeleton lying in the tomb. I think the Emperor was something else. Valkyrie felt a chill in her spine. What do you mean? Something else? Daniel crouched beside the tomb again. Carefully, he moved a piece of cracked armor near the skeleton's shoulder. Something underneath, it reflected the scanner light. Small engraving. Very small. Almost hidden. Daniel brushed the dust away. Then he froze. Valkyrie stepped closer. What did you find? Daniel didn't answer. He just pointed. The scanners zoomed in. The engraving appeared in the hologram above the tomb. It was a symbol. Not alien. Not imperial. Human. Valkyrie recognized it immediately. It was the same emblem Daniel had shown them earlier. The symbol of Earth. But underneath it, there were words. Ancient English text. Daniel read them slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain Elias Ward. The chamber went still. Valkyrie looked at him. Who is that? Daniel swallowed. I don't know. He looked again at the bullet wound in the skull, then at the ID tag. Then at the ancient carvings of the Emperor. And suddenly, a terrifying possibility formed in his mind. Daniel stood up slowly. If this man was Captain Elias Ward? Valkyrie nodded nervously. Yes? Daniel looked back at the Emperor carvings one last time, and his voice dropped. Then the real Emperor. He paused. A cold feeling spread through the room. Was never buried here. The chamber lights flickered. And for the first time since they opened the tomb, one of the ancient scanners detected something new. A faint signal. Still active. Deep inside the tomb. Something was still alive. The scanner beep echoed through the silent chamber. At first, the alien scientists thought it was an error. After all, the tomb had been sealed for 40,000 years. Nothing inside should still be active. But the scanner beeped again, then again. Valkyrie turned sharply toward the technician operating the device. What is that signal? She asked. The alien stared at the screen, his eyes wide with disbelief. I'm detecting energy. Daniel felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Energy? He repeated quietly. The technician nodded slowly. Yes, a very weak signal. But it's definitely coming from inside this tomb. The entire room suddenly felt different. The tomb was no longer just a grave. Something inside it was still working. Daniel looked around the chamber, studying the walls again. The ancient carvings now felt less like history, and more like warnings. Where exactly is the signal coming from? Valkyrie asked. The technician adjusted the scanner. The holographic map of the chamber appeared in the air. A small red dot blinked slowly beneath the floor of the tomb, directly under the sarcophagus. The technician said. Daniel frowned. There's another chamber? The scanners ran a deeper scan. Moments later, the answer appeared. Valkyrie's voice trembled slightly. Yes, the tomb they had opened was only the upper level. Something far larger existed beneath it. Daniel stared at the skeleton of Captain Elias Ward again. Suddenly, everything made more sense. The bullet wound. Hidden symbol. The warning carvings. He spoke quietly. I think this wasn't meant to be the Emperor's tomb. Valkyrie looked at him. Then what is it? Daniel gestured to the skeleton. A message. The aliens waited. Daniel continued slowly. Captain Ward wasn't buried here to honor him. His voice lowered. He was buried here to warn everyone. The room fell silent again. Valkyrie turned back toward the hidden chamber beneath him. You believe the Emperor is still below us? Daniel nodded once. Yes. The technician suddenly gasped. The scanner screen flickered. The signal just increased, he said nervously. Valkyrie's eyes widened. Increased? Yes. Daniel felt his stomach drop. That means something down there is powering up. The lights inside the chamber flickered again. The ancient tomb walls vibrated softly, like a machine waking after a very long sleep. One of the alien scientists whispered nervously, "Perhaps we should leave." But before anyone could move, the ground beneath the sarcophagus shifted. A deep mechanical sound echoed through the chamber. Ancient locks, hidden beneath the tomb, began to open. Dust fell from the ceiling. The floor slowly split apart, and beneath the sarcophagus, a massive circular door appeared. Valkyrie stepped back in shock. That door, it wasn't detected before. Daniel stared at it. It was hidden. The circular door began to slide open with a heavy metallic roar. Cold air rushed out from the darkness below. Ancient lights flickered deep inside the chamber. Beneath them, the scanner beeped wildly now, energy levels rising rapidly. The technician shouted. Daniel took a slow step toward the opening. Valkyrie grabbed his arm. "Human Daniel, that may not be safe." Daniel looked at her. "I know." Then he looked back down into the darkness. For 40,000 years, something had been sleeping beneath this tomb. Something powerful enough to control half the galaxy. Something Captain Elias Ward had tried to stop. Daniel whispered quietly. "I think Ward sealed it down there," Valkyrie asked carefully. "Sealed what?" Before Daniel could answer, a sound came from the darkness below. A deep mechanical hum. Then a voice. Old. Artificial. But still perfectly clear. "Power systems restored." The chamber froze. The voice continued. "Primary command protocols reactivating." Valkyrie's hands trembled. "What is that?" Daniel didn't answer, because he already knew. The voice spoke again. "Galactic Emperor Control System online." The words echoed through the tomb. Every alien in the room stared into the darkness below. Daniel felt his heart pounding. Then the voice said something else. Something that made the blood in his veins turn cold. "Human genetic signature detected." The system paused for a moment. And it spoke again. "Welcome back, Commander." The aliens slowly turned toward Daniel, their faces filled with confusion and fear. Daniel stood frozen at the edge of the opening. He hadn't moved. He hadn't said anything. But the ancient system had recognized him. The tomb lights flickered again. The voice spoke one final time. "Awaiting your orders to restore the Empire."